Good morning. So we're going to get started. I wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction. So last year I had actually presented Social Media Savvy at Integrated Learning, and it was very well received. And the biggest problem I saw as a presenter is it is such a broad topic, and it's something that we really need as educators, as digital citizens, just as people, honestly, in this world right now. And one of the things we ran out of time for was a lot of the things that I wanted to give you to take back to your classroom. So you could take it back to a classroom, apply it, and teach it, because it's not a topic that everybody's super familiar with as well. So that said, we are introducing this topic again. We're going to focus this year on instructional strategies, and hopefully you can walk out of here with some things to take directly back to your classroom. I do want to let you know at the end there will be a QR code that you can scan to get to our presentation. And once you get to the presentation, a lot of the things in the presentation are hyperlinked that lead you to Google Docs, or maybe reading resources that you can use in your classroom. You can print out, you can copy to your Google Drive. If anything doesn't work after the fact, or you're not sure how to get that into whatever platform you use, please feel free to reach out, and I would love to help you. So that said, my name is Stacy Kinnear-Kutz. I'm from Lehigh Career and Technical Institute. I'm an instructional technology specialist here. This is my third year. I absolutely love being able to support teachers. And obviously right now in this pandemic environment we're in, technology has become the forefront of a lot of what we're doing. So these are just some pictures from my own personal social media that you can see my three crazy kids there, and my love of Dunkin' Donuts coffee and all things Dunkin'. I have it sitting next to me right now. But just one of those things to kind of show you, this is some of my personal social media platform. This is what you'd see if you look me up.
I'm Kelly Cahoon. I'm the instructional coach at Lehigh Career and Technical Institute. I've been here for 4 years, and before that, in my previous life, I was an English teacher. And these are some pictures that you'll find on my social media as well. So I use social media. I'm pretty active on Twitter for my professional learning network, but also obviously we use social media for our own keeping connected with family and everything. That's my little guy, and I love to go camping and be out in nature. So that's what you're gonna see on a lot of mine.
So we're going to talk today a lot about a digital footprint, and the digital footprint is an idea that I had actually spoken to some teachers about. And I guess in my head, digital footprint was something we understood as a term, but it's really not. So I really wanted to explain a little bit what a digital footprint is. So just like when you go for a walk in the sand, your children make a footprint, you make a footprint, your footprint is bigger. So the goal with a digital footprint actually is to kind of make it as small as possible. Digital footprints can include very deliberate things like the things we just showed you, the pictures we're posting on social media. But digital footprint can include some things that you may not think about. So some of the resources we're going to show you, these are some ways that you're creating a digital footprint without necessarily knowing it, by liking pages, following pages, clicking on links within different websites or within social media. Those are all actually influencing your digital footprint. So the goal obviously is to keep it as small as possible, but the other goal is to make it as deliberate as possible, because we're in 2020 now, and digital footprints can be used for good as well. They can be used to help promote and to help create kind of a brand and help you maybe get a job, help you get recognized. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. It is very important as teachers, we're teaching our students this, because they don't necessarily think about what they're posting now being something that may influence what they're doing in 15 years. They don't necessarily have that forethought. And we've seen stories very frequently in the news about things that were posted on Twitter many, many, many years ago, someone digs up at the most inopportune times. So it's really important we teach this. We often think about PDP as things like resume building and interview skills, and all those are also extremely important. This is a piece that we really want to make sure we have covered, because a lot of employers are going to Google you when they get their resumes. They're going to look you up, and you want to make sure what they find is what you need them to find to make sure you can get in that door. Otherwise, the interview skills aren't going to be very useful. So these were just a few slides from last year just to kind of lay the foundation. So in this particular slide, and this I believe was 2018, but in this particular slide, you can see social media is very dependent on the age of your participants. So Facebook tends to be kind of that older group. If you look at Snapchat, obviously Snapchat is higher between the ages of 12 and 34. So the type of social media you gravitate towards is dependent on your age, is what they found. The same thing, you can see how the social media usage has changed. So Facebook has declined in usage over the years, whereas other things like Instagram, those images that we see, Snapchat, these have increased. Some of that is because we are becoming a more image-driven culture, Snapchat and, oh, my brain just completely froze. But sorry. So we're becoming a more image-driven culture. So these Instagrams and Snapchats, these are very image-driven, whereas Facebook is much more word-driven. So I think that would be some of it, but some of it is the age of our social media usage as well, which is why some of this is growing. So these are just some important things to keep in mind as you go forward. There are some laws that govern social media usage as a teacher, as a professional. These are some things that you may want to talk to your students about as well. One activity that I've seen people use is they actually will pull like a professional code of conduct from a local business. So that's where an OIC might come in handy. But being able to pull that and actually look at it and see what acceptable usage is on there. Is there anything on there about social media usage? If you would get employed by this company, what am I allowed to post? What am I not allowed to post? And what ramifications can that have on me and as an employee? One thing I do want to caution you as we go through this, we're going to be talking a lot about creating the digital footprint and talking a lot about building that deliberately. But one thing I do want to point out is we're not really going to be teaching tools, and there's a very specific reason for that. So when I talk, even to my daughter, who's 11, we talk about different tools. The tools that she's familiar with are not necessarily the same tools that I use. Again, Facebook usage is higher among certain age groups. I do use Snapchat, but I know a lot of people that do not use Snapchat as well. So depending what you're using social media for, and depending your age, depending your awareness, you are probably not going to be able to stay ahead of your students on these tools. They are going to come into you every year with new tools that have come out, social media tools. They're all going to have very specific things like TikTok, and they're going to have these specific rules. And once we start teaching tools, we can't stay ahead of our students, and we end up losing the forest for the trees. We don't talk about the digital footprint as much as the tool. So an example, my daughter's currently doing a virtual schooling, and she is taking a digital citizenship course. And again, she's 11. And she comes down to me the one day, and she was working on this course, and she said, "Mom, what is MySpace?" And I said, where did that come from? I was so confused. So she was showing me her book and her reading material and her quizzes, and her quiz, she kept referring to MySpace, and she had no idea what MySpace was. So I ended up having to explain to her an antiquated social media tool just so she was able to take this quiz. And in the end, I don't really know she learned what she needed to about social media. She also had a question that I questioned. I went out back to the teacher, and I said, I'm a little confused. It was, what is a pressing current issue in social or in digital communication? And the choices were wikis, blogging, cell phones. And I said, well, given that MySpace is in this course, I'm thinking maybe they might be picking a different answer that I am, but it is 2020, and you all know in your own experiences, cell phones are huge right now, whether they're in the classroom or not in the classroom. Do we allow them to use them for instructional purposes? We have students on hybrid learning and virtual learning. Can they access their content through that? So my answer would have been cell phones. I was incorrect because the test was made many years ago, and it was focused on a tool, not a skill. So we're not going to be teaching about tools, and I would caution you to kind of tiptoe around that. Not to say you can't mention an Instagram or a Facebook, but keep in mind you're teaching the skills more than the tools.
So it's imperative that we're teaching students to be social media savvy. We often have assumptions that we have this tech generation that's coming in front of us that knows how to do everything, but just like everything else, they need to be taught how to use things in an appropriate way, because we know that it's not going to work to say you can't use social media, that you don't want to put anything out there in the public, because that's just, it's not realistic of where we're at as a society today. So when you're thinking about professional skills that you need to teach your students, you can think about interviewing, you can think about writing resumes, but you really should have something in there about what their online public presence is saying about themselves as a professional. So in 2008, I was getting ready to graduate from Bloomsburg, and I was doing my student teaching. And I remember getting pulled into a session with my coordinator from Bloomsburg because another student teacher in a different state school was being denied her degree because of what she said was something that was posted on social media, a picture of her holding a yellow cup with the phrase "drunken pirate" underneath it. And she was saying that she was being denied denied her teaching certificate because of this. Now, this was back in 2008, and this was posted on MySpace, just again to give you kind of some context. But it was really the first time that me as a student kind of leaving college was even talked about social media, which makes sense because of the time period that it was. But fast forward into the current generation that we're in now, and almost daily there is another post about a former Twitter or a former Facebook post that's getting people into trouble about what their online public presence is saying about themselves.
And these are some examples I had actually shared last year. And again, most of these are hyperlinked to take you directly to news articles. So if you wanted to try to leverage some of these in your classroom, you can. But you can also do a Google search for social media and employment and social media and losing scholarships. And even just if you look at professional athletes, very, very often a professional athlete who suddenly becomes a starting quarterback, who suddenly gets drafted, suddenly there's tweets that come up that they never thought about coming up. It never occurred to them. So you don't need to use these, but you can. I wanted to give you some things. But this particular one, I actually gave you two perspectives. There's the same article, the same story, but it's two different perspectives on whether this is, should they have rescinded this Harvard admission or should they not have? And that's another discussion you can have in your classroom. We say that social media is prevalent, but at what point is it okay to have a personal life? At what point, if you're, and in the 2008 case, let's say she was 27 when she posted that. Is she allowed to be a drunken pirate at 27? I don't know. So there's different things that you can have discussions with about your students. It's not really a hard, fast rule that says this is postable, this is not postable. It's just being aware that everything you post could potentially be taken out of context or could potentially be used for or against you. This is another one, and I would caution you if you want to use this one to read it in advance because there are some very interesting language choices. But this is a case where she actually posted because she was very excited. She had just gotten this NASA internship and it was like her dream come true, which was fantastic. The problem is the way she posted it and the reputation that NASA is trying to uphold and the way she handled it after the fact. She didn't take it down. She didn't apologize. She tried to defend her language and she actually ended up losing this opportunity. So again, she was excited. She wasn't posting anything deliberately derogatory. It was just the language she used and then the way she handled it after the fact. So again, you may feel free to use these, but a simple Google search will net you a lot of resources for this as well. And this is one example I use. This is actually a real post that I had found in a local group asking people, hey, if you need a babysitter, here I go. I'm here. I'm here to help you babysit. And I don't know this person, and I've deliberately tried to block out anything that would be identifiable for her. She might be the best person ever. She might be an amazing babysitter. Personally, when I look at this, I see this ad and I go, oh, there's a babysitter. I wonder what she's like. Do I trust her with my children? And when I click on her name, the parts of her profile that are public, this is what it shows up as a description for her. Again, she might be the best babysitter ever, but when I see this, I'm not going to be taking my children to you. So what she has posted is deliberately undermining what she's trying to do. So knowing these things, being aware of these things, knowing that the perception that you're giving people in one avenue may influence what you're trying to do in another. Those are some important connections that students don't always make. So one really quick thing I wanted to show from the Facebook profile end is in Facebook, there is a way to view your Facebook as, and I recommend teachers do this, especially when they first get hired as a CTC. Teachers coming out of industry might be dealing with a slightly different professional code of conduct than we do. So making sure you go to this view as profile under Facebook, and you can't do it from the app on an iPhone, just FYI. This is in Safari, but you can go to these three dots here and click to the view as, and you can view this as a public. So if somebody looked at my Facebook feed, what would they see? And on my particular Facebook feed, you're going to find my profile pictures and my cover picture, and that's pretty much it. The other thing you want to be careful though, I am a expert Facebook miner. I wear it like a badge of honor. I'm like the FBI. But one thing that you have to be cognizant of as well is in any of these platforms, it's not only what you're posting, it's what your friends are posting if you have your friend list public. So if I go on someone's Facebook profile and they have their settings locked down, but their friend list is not, I'm able to see their friends. And if their friends are posting things negative and derogatory, it also can paint a different picture than what you want. Is that fair? Probably not. But it's just something to be aware of to make sure your friends list is also not public, because sometimes that can be a problem too. If they're posting things that are not appropriate for what you need to do as a professional. So, and the same is true for pages you follow. If you're following pages like NASA, that's fantastic. But keep in mind the pages you follow are also creating that digital footprint. So one thing I recommend both professionals and students do is they kind of take an inventory of what they're doing and they make a deliberate plan. So there are so many social media sites out there. I have 3 of them listed here, 3 of the big ones. These are not necessarily the only ones. You also have LinkedIn profiles, which is something you may want to leverage with your students and talk to them more about as a professional. You also have things like your TikTok and your Snapchat. So one thing I like to talk to teachers about, but also like to talk to students about is creating this roadmap. So when I'm looking at my digital media, my Facebook, when I look under audience and friends, I mean my Facebook for my friends and family. I don't mean my Facebook as my professional venue. This is not where I'm sharing a million articles about instructional technology. This is where I'm posting the crazy stories of what my kids did, maybe what I made for supper last night, something like that. That's what you're going to find in my Facebook. I'm actually not a big Instagram user. I think at some point as a 2020 professional, as a 2020 citizen in general, you have to kind of weed out what you can focus on. I can't do every single social media site and stay sane. So I don't do Instagram very much, but I have an account. Twitter is my professional handle. Twitter is where I am going to post my instructional technology things and Google resources. And so deliberately setting out and saying, I'm not posting my kids all over Twitter. I'm not going to inundate all of my friends with the latest Google updates on Facebook. Knowing what are those audiences, I can start to deliberately shape my own profile. What am I sharing? How often do I post? How public and private am I on these things? And I do have a column there that you could have students add something else. Is there a resource used like TikTok? Maybe YouTube. YouTube is a big one right now. What is your audience and what are you posting and why are you posting it? This does link to a Google Doc that you would be able to click on and you could print it out. You could edit it for your students. You could share it with your students, but this would give you something that you could take into your classroom.
So we know that there are many different ways to use social media, and social media could be used for professional and also personal reasons. But it's important how we're thinking about how we're preparing our students as professionals to go out into a field where they're likely going to be using social media at some point in their life for some aspect of their job. That could be looking up recipes if they're a chef, or that could be, advertising something, a service on Facebook, or some other resource. So we kind of saw that at LCTI as being something that students were going to have a career path possibly in. So last year, we actually were able to add in a new class called Emerging Digital Media and Social Communications. So this is Mr. Savage. He is our fabulous emerging digital media teacher. And his goal is to teach video production and audio production, but teach it in a way that is going to be used in multiple formats. So typically this class might have been preparing students for, doing video production, private video production, film production, but it might not necessarily have been in the lens of using that in an online public presence, using that for YouTube, using that in podcasts, using that in other social media aspects. But really, I mean, if we go out there and we look at the CTE schools or traditional schools, almost every school district has some sort of social media, because that's how you get to people. That's where people are at. It's just another way of expanding your communication to stay in contact with your stakeholders. So we actually created this class at LCTI to get students thinking about those different social media and online presence and how that's going to relate to future career pathways. So obviously, if you're a carpentry teacher, you might be looking at this going, I don't know if I would be using YouTube to put something on there, but eventually your students might be doing that. They might be using YouTube not only to look up how to do something in particular, but also as a way of promoting their future employment to their future careers. So it's fast moving, it's ever changing, that's for sure. So it's important that we're thinking about this not only in our personal use and entertainment use, but also as a form of a future career pathway for our students, because social media will touch them at some point in their jobs. It's just a matter of to what degree and in what manner.
And there are definitely components of this as well that I know Mr. Savage teaches, but in general, like she said, the construction example, analytics within social media can be a very, very powerful tool. And I know he teaches those as a deliberate tool. He teaches manipulating analytics and how do you utilize those. But I actually have a relative that is one of the things he does for the business he works for. He looks at their social media analytics to see where is their audience, where is their reach, where could they try to maybe modify to get more likes, to get more people on their page. If I'm a business owner, whether it's a construction company, whether I'm an electrician, if I'm a business owner, being able to have someone who can leverage that for me to get my information out there, to get my resources out there, those can become powerful tools. And it may be something you personally don't feel comfortable in your lab teaching, but you may have someone on your staff that can support you with that to give your students just a taste of that. And again, OACs can come in handy for things like this because you have a business owning OAC member. Those are people who may be able to come back with you and share that information with your students as a modern approach to the business lens. This isn't about putting an ad in the newspaper all the time, but social media is a way to increase your audience and increase your customer base, your client base. So how are they leveraging that in their business? There's a good chance that you have resources of people who can help your students do this.
So a great way of getting students started and thinking about what their online public presence is to have them do something simple like Googling themselves. And this is also a great activity for you to do for yourself as well as just a professional, because if I'm a human resource person and I'm thinking about hiring somebody, one of the first things I might do is Google them to see what their online public presence is saying about them. But it's important to set this in context and to give the students a resource and something to think about while they're Googling themselves, or it can quickly just become a, oh my gosh, look at what I found activity, when really they need to be thinking and analyzing what that online public presence says about themselves. So Stacy, I'm going to kick it to you now so you can talk about what happens when you Google yourself.
And like she said, I remember substitute teaching at a point when the kids suddenly realized if they looked up teachers' names, they could see their houses from like an aerial perspective. And they were so excited about this. We are so beyond that right now. If I Google myself, this was some of the stuff that came up. So I went in and Googled on the top left. This is actually a YouTube video I created for a video course I was taking at Penn State. And we had to post it into YouTube. This is me talking about Pennsylvania Dutch culture and hex signs as an art form. So You come up with that, and that's fine. That isn't necessarily relevant to what I'm doing currently as a teacher, as a professional, but it's fine. And it gives you another perspective on things that I know, things I'm passionate about. The really interesting one on the right-hand side, this is a website called My Life. And when you Google yourself, this almost always will come up as one of your top hits that you can click on. It's a little scary because this is one of those when we talked about deliberate media and social media presence. When I Google myself, have them look at the news articles, because if you hit the news at all, sometimes it could be an award, which would be fantastic. Let's hope you didn't hit the news for any not so good reasons, but it's good to know what's out there because you may not be able to take it down, but it's important to make sure you know it's there. So at least you have a shot at defending it, or at least aren't surprised by a question. But checking the news is important, checking the images, which is actually how I found this video, but also clicking on some of those random links. So this My Life one comes up with a rating on how, I think it's called trustworthy or something. I'm not sure where it's getting that from. It links me to some people. Some people are people I'm related to. Some people it's saying I'm related to, I'm not. So I can't swear it's accurate, but it's something to be aware of. It gives you my age. It'll tell you a whole lot of information about where I live. But what's really interesting is when you start going to the bottom of these, depending who you're Googling, you're going to start seeing things like political leanings. Like, what is my political leaning? And we've done this with a few people that we know, a few friends, a few family members, just to kind of see how accurate it is. Sometimes it's scarily accurate in terms of what is your salary, what is your educational background, who are your connections. But sometimes it's like, wait, what? That's not my political leanings at all. And they're getting it from somewhere. So they're getting it from the things you click on in Facebook, the things you click on in Twitter. All of that stuff creates your digital footprint. So the more you click on, the more information you publicly post, the broader information that this particular tool is able to mine about you. So sometimes students will go in and see that, and they'll be shocked at how much this was able to collect from what they do. And it's an eye-opening experience for adults, but it's definitely one for kids. So it's something to, just an interesting little thing to do, just to see what's there. Again, it's hard to take your footprint down. So we need to teach them now how not to build it in a way they don't want it, because once it's out there, it's really hard to pull that back.
So I stress the importance of setting context for this activity, or else it could become just a, well, what do I find out there? Well, students know that there's information about them out there. We've kind of functioned under this shroud of privacy in our age, but they don't function under that. They know that there's no privacy as far as their online content for how they display themselves. So it's important to set context for what their digital footprint is actually saying about themselves. So if we just did a quick Google search and found this digital footprint quiz, that will give them a framework of thinking about, okay, so I'm seeing myself on these, but what does that actually mean? Like, to what degree am I out there in my online public presence? And this is hyperlinked in there. And the second page of this document is actually, now what? Like, what should I be doing about it? So it's important that we're giving these as teaching tools to our students, not just activities, because just like anything else, just like teaching them how to use a new tool, just like teaching them a new skill or a new process, this is a new skill, this is a new process for them. And you can get very creative in your ways of doing this. So having them kind of draw out what makes up the most of their digital footprint after they've kind of analyzed and Googled themselves. At the bottom left there, you might see like one of those Cosmos quizzes that, like, if this then, thinking about, if I'm seeing this, then what should I be doing about that? Or if I'm seeing this and I'm seeing this and I'm seeing this, how am I going to adjust? And how can I get out there with maybe some positive PR for myself to set myself up as a professional? Because that's really what the idea behind this is. We know that they're going to be using social media for personal reasons, but they also need to start thinking about themselves as, what is it going to say about me as a professional? We know one of the first things that human resource people do is Google people. So it's really important to train them and give them that context. This isn't just for fun. It's not just an activity to do with you. It's really about your future. And it's just another step in that kind of career pathway that we need to send you on. So we actually created just a quick activity for you, having the students thinking about their social media tool. And like we said, we do not care what the tool is that the students are using. What we want them thinking about is not only how they're using it, but how big is their public image, their online public presence based upon what they are using. So the first page of this, which isn't pictured, is having them rate what their social media usage is of each tool and how high their online public presence is for that tool. The second page, which is depicted here on the left, and this is set up in a Google slide presentation where they can drag and drop under what size footprint, 4 being the biggest in this sense and 1 being the smallest, but thinking about how big their online public presence is in each of these. And it's a great way of thinking about, we evaluate different tools for what job we need. So like LinkedIn is going to obviously be a professional one. So if that is at a number 1, I'm really counting on that as, I'm heading out and sitting for interviews with jobs. We might want to bump up that online public presence on LinkedIn versus where I might have my Instagram and I'm, using that to find recipes. Well, I might want that to be less. So, and we also included some others in there because they're using stuff we don't even know what it is. Let's be honest. It's hard to be up on every single tool that the students are using. It's important that we're thinking about not only social media, but other things that are increasing their online public presence. News articles about them, YouTube videos about them, different things that they might have from their home schools, different accomplishments, especially if they're an athlete. These are things that are building up their online public presence in a positive way, and we should be acknowledging those as well. After they're kind of doing this analyzing of how big their digital footprint is using each of these online tools, it's important to have a reflection. And if you're a Collins Writing School, this is a great activity for your students to do, to analyze what does it say about them? Is it helping them achieve their goals of what they want to do in the future? And if they're not, then what does that student need to do to kind of help with that? And this is really where a dialogue needs to come in because the students don't know how to fix this kind of stuff. And like Stacy said, you might not be the person to know how to fix that kind of stuff too, but it's important that we get people in contact with the people that they need to be in contact with to have this. And a great way to do that is your OAC, because they're hiring people and they can kind of walk those students through what process they're going through for hiring people. So if I see this as somebody that's going to hire somebody, I'm automatically going to discount that person from this job. But here are some things that I'm looking for. So it's important to not only do the activity to Google themselves, but have the students doing that reflection and doing some goal setting based upon what they're finding. And again, this is hyperlinked in this presentation. It's a Google slide presentation, something that you could do with your students. But again, it's not an activity to just do and forget about. It's really going to elicit some sort of dialogue with your students that you might need to spend some time with. Another place to look, and we've kind of hyperlinked some resources in here for you. As Stacy said, it is important to review and to know the students that you're working with and to know what's in the articles that you're sending out to them. But finding news articles, here's one that's particularly hyperlinked about 9 things to avoid on social media while looking for a new job. So this might be a good way of kind of transitioning from now I know about myself, but what can I learn from others? And finding articles and incorporating that. So if you are, again, a Collins Writing School, this is an easy win for you to do a type 2 writing of summarizing what their goals are for moving forward with their digital footprint.
And back to just that idea that you don't need to be the expert. You don't need to necessarily know everything about everything. There's a lot of resources out there beyond what we've created that you can do some nice searches for and find maybe something that's more specific to what you are looking for in your students. Maybe you know that there's been an issue, and sometimes that happens. There's an issue happening within your school that you want to address that specific thing. Like there's a student who maybe had this particular problem. Maybe you need to look up something like that, and it's not directly related to digital footprint, but it's social media based. So these are some resources I wanted to give you. NetSmarts is one. They're both free. So you can go into NetSmarts, you can look up some resources. There's some videos. NetSmarts is nice because it also has like this parent component where it goes in and talks about, as a parent, maybe how do you teach this? And I know a lot of schools have actually started doing workshops for parents as well, teaching things like this, teaching digital citizenship, safety online, social media. What do you post? What don't you post? How do you monitor your kids' activities? So there's a lot of resources in NetSmarts for that. I really like this social media safety for teens poster. It's just a really quick run through of some of the things we've talked about, like check your comments and images, or talk to your friends of what if it's okay to post. On my Facebook, one of the things I have set up is that I don't allow my name to be tagged without me approving it. So if someone tags me in a photo, it doesn't instantly magically appear in my photos as something I've been tagged in. I have to approve that. So it gives me a little bit of control. If there's a friend who's continuously tagging you in inappropriate things, you probably want to unfriend them or have this discussion with them. But it does kind of go through some of the things we've talked about, which is really nice. Common Sense Education is a really fantastic resource. You do need to create an account to access most of the things, but it's a free account. And it's a really robust tool, and it goes well beyond social media. It goes into just digital everything. So I wanted to give you that because you might have an interest in something that's not in what we've shared now, and you want to find more information about it, something else you want to include in PDP. So I wanted to just share that with you. This is an example of what you're going to find in there. So when I go into Common Sense Media, this is one specifically for digital footprints. So on the left, you can kind of see it is a lesson plan. And that, as a teacher, especially as a teacher who maybe this is not something I am super savvy in, and I'm a little concerned, I don't know where to start. This is a really fantastic place to start. So it has a reading, something to read, something to listen to, often has a video, and it very often comes with its own, on the right here, you can see a Google slide presentation that will guide you through that lesson and discussion. It often has some kind of tangible or worksheet, something the students can complete, usually in a Google Doc form as well. So it really puts a lesson in your hands that you don't necessarily have to create. Now, that doesn't mean you can adjust it. I know one of the lessons I was looking for, it walks you through looking at your digital footprint and your digital image. And then at the end, it says create an avatar. I don't know, in my classroom, I want to spend that much time creating an avatar that kind of looks like kind of what I think I might look like on social media. I don't know that's a good use of my time. Is that a great discussion to have? Probably. The other concern is a lot of those like avatar things that they're talking about, you may have to have students create accounts for, and we don't want to recommend students create accounts all over the place because that goes exactly against what we're saying. Don't create accounts all over the place. Keep a small digital footprint. So you can edit it, you can adjust it, you can make it your own, but it gives you that framework that maybe you didn't have to start with. And just to give you an idea of some of the other things, this is just an example of 12th grade, and they actually have lessons for every single grade. So this is just a 12th grade snapshot, but it talks about media balance and well-being. So that kind of goes back to, I don't do Instagram. I know it's a great tool. I know lots of people love it. I have an account. I can't monitor everything. So I have to kind of pick and choose. So that's one of those things. Debating that privacy line, and like Kelly said, we've all grown up more with this shroud of privacy about us, that we expect privacy. And they've actually done studies that our students right now are the opposite. They're expecting they have none. They're expecting everybody knows everything anyway, and it creates a whole new problem. So they don't mind sharing everything because that's just the way that they're seeing their world. It talks about digital footprints. It talks about relationships and communications, cyberbullying, so some of that cybersecurity stuff. So Common Sense goes well beyond the digital footprint. So I would highly recommend you go in there and poke around and see whether you're a classroom teacher, whether you're a support coach, someone, anybody. There's a lot of really great things in there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to start from scratch. You can go out and get the information.
We have a question here from Jay. Is Google search considered part of one's digital footprint and available to digital minors?
Yes. So a Google search is definitely something that, like, I think what I'm hearing is, if I search something, so let's say I search cat videos, does that necessarily influence my digital footprint? The answer is it definitely creates some marks in the sand, because think about when you're Google searching and the next thing you know on your cell phone and Facebook, like I've Google searched purses, leopard print purses or something. And suddenly on Facebook, I'm suddenly seeing all these recommendations for leopard print purses. And it's kind of scary and kind of helpful because now I don't have to search them again. But it definitely creates links sometimes, depending how you search. Now, Google is nice because there is a way that you can switch to a private screen that can kind of shroud some of that, but it can be for the digital mining component. There's actually some really interesting articles. Target did a targeted, no pun intended, campaign a few years ago where they were using what you were purchasing and even things like what you were purchasing in the stores. And they were like, oh, well, you bought diapers, or, oh, you bought prenatal vitamins. And then they started sending out targeted advertisements to people for baby products. And these are people who may not have even necessarily told anybody they were pregnant. And it kind of went, it didn't end well because it ended up looking like they were kind of creepy. But there's so many pieces that are connected right now that yes, your digital search can come in. So I believe that was the question you were asking. It may not directly be like, if I'm an employer and I Google you, I'm going to see what you were Googling, but it could influence some of those other subtle pieces, like your things like in that My Life thing. This is the QR code for this presentation. I wanted to make sure to get that up here. I know we have a few questions in the Q&A as well. So I wanted to make sure to get this up here for you because it's not just images. As we said, almost every slide has hyperlinked resources for you to click and go that you can print out, save, whatever, make your own. So I wanted to make sure you get this before we run out of time or before you have to duck out. I know sometimes if you're presenting next, you might need to leave earlier too. So I want to make sure that you're able to get this. And also so that you're able to get our contact information if you want to reach out to us and have further questions, have ideas, have suggestions. We would love to hear them. Those are our emails, obviously, but that's also our Twitter handles. So if you'd like to follow us, you can. I think as many people this past, since March, we keep saying, and then March. Like we were doing this and then March. We were doing really, really good on Twitter and then March. And I think we all just had to, as humans, make decisions. And Twitter is not one that we've been as active in as we used to be. But please feel free to follow us. I'm hoping when things calm down, whenever that is, we can kind of pick that up, but you can see some of the resources that we have on there as well. So I wanted to make sure to get that out there before we switch to Q&A.
I am working to put the link up of this presentation in case you can't get the QR code for whatever reason. So.
Does anybody else out there have any questions for our panelists? Somebody's asked if you've seen the Social Dilemma on Netflix. Have either of you seen that?
I have. I would highly recommend that. As you said, it's scary. It's wonderful. It's a little bit of everything. It talks about a lot of what we're saying today, but I definitely would recommend that highly. And I know even as schools, there's schools that are doing different screenings. I'm trying to think one of our local schools just did one last year, but this has become a big thing. And as Kelly mentioned in the beginning, what's really scary is the fact that, 2008 is where she shared that one article from. And I'm not gonna say that was the beginning of social media and people's downfall, but 2008 was kind of was when she shared the article. But then the problem is here we are 12 years later and our students are making the same mistake. So we're missing something in how we're preparing our students. And we need to make sure this gets out there because they could leverage this in good ways, but once it's on that footprint, it's impossible. So yes, I would highly recommend watching that as well. Any more questions? Oh.
Ooh, just want to highlight this one in the chat. Useful for both a teacher and a parent. Yes, as a parent, these are conversations to be having with your kiddos, your students as well. Kind of like the conversation I just had to have with my 6-year-old about why he can't have a TikTok. Yeah, we're not going to be doing that at 6 years old. So
My daughter would like a YouTube channel, and she's very upset that I don't let her have one because she has friends who have one and she wants one. And again, she's 11. And I was kind of expecting that the teenage years to start later, but nope, we're in them. But she said to me the one, you just don't understand technology, Mom. Yep, that might be it. So yes, as a parent, as a teacher, and some of our students don't have parents who are sitting down saying, no, you can't have this, or no, I'm not giving you a TikTok, or my daughter's only social, she does have a phone right now. It is very, very locked down. And it was funny because most people are like, here's a cell phone, and their friends are all excited. And I was saying, hey, here's a phone, and here's all the ways I can track everything you're doing. And here's the ways I can shut you down, even if I'm not next to it. And here's all the timers I've set and the limits I have set. So it's a different perspective, but knowing that not all of our students have that person looking over their shoulder and monitoring their texts and monitoring what they're posting and making sure they don't have accounts where they shouldn't have accounts, and making sure they have passwords for accounts they need accounts for. They don't all have that. So not to say we have to replace the parents, but it's definitely something as a professional we want to make sure our students have. TikTok and China stealing personal information. That goes back to that digital footprint thing people don't think about. I know from a tech specialist standpoint, one of the things we do is, as teachers come to us with resources, we have to look at not only is that resource valid, what kind of information is that resource, what are we agreeing to? You know, whenever you download an app, you get that humongous list of use terms, and I'll be honest, I don't read them. I scroll till I get to the accept and continue. And I may have just sold my house. I don't know. So I think that that's where our students have to be cognizant too of what they're agreeing to, but knowing where your things come out. That's actually one of the things we look for when people ask us for permission for things like apps and websites. One of the things we look for is, where is that app being housed? Different countries have different rules for data security. And if that app is being housed in a country with very lax laws on data security, you could end up in a huge data breach from, a country across the ocean and not really think about it. So knowing where your apps are being housed, where's the information being housed, I think that there's a very healthy level of concern as to where is it being housed and what are the laws in place in that country to protect it. Because even though I'm a United States citizen, if my data is being housed in a company that is a Chinese company or a German company, their company policies are going to align with their company's or their country's laws. So being aware of that as well is huge as a parent, as a digital consumer, as a teacher, just keeping all of those pieces in mind, because the data is out there. Oh, thank you. I see an infographic on terms of service agreements. That's fantastic. I'm going to have to save that one. That's fantastic. I may even drop that back in our presentation. Thank you very much. That came from Adam. There are so many amazing resources out there, and it's just, as Kelly said, an ever-changing time. Like there's just a constant changing, and social media has become huge. Silly emails, yes, silly emails. I've seen resumes come through. They create these silly emails when they're 16, 18, and you go, oh, well, that's interesting.
And teaching them to have something separate with a high priority, because most of our students, I don't want to say most, many students don't even check email. Like that's they get their information from social media, from different messengers. So thinking about setting up a professional email for themselves that they're actually going to check regularly in case they get information from that. So thanks for sharing that, Mike. That's great.
So Jay's asking, what's the title of the Netflix video again?
It's The Social Dilemma. Let me see if I can. Yep, Social Dilemma on Netflix. I'm not sure if I can direct link it. We could actually probably add a slide as well for that, but just to kind of throw that out there. So if you want to reference back to it after the fact, that you can see that. I'll make a note.